Welcome to B-Rate YouTube, the cheaper version. Well, probably not much longer considering all the inflation that Biden is causing. At least that's what I hear when I listen to some of the attacks, from the conservative side, all the inflation, the trillions upon trillions of dollars that President Biden has passed during his administration. Which, I mean, on one hand, we can't really count the budget really, so that doesn't really count. Um, Realistically, when I think about it, the only big thing that President Biden has passed spending wise was the I think it was called like the American Family Relief, whatever, blah blah blah. He passed that thing back in what was that, like February or so. It's a couple of $1 trillion. And really, the main elements of it was, everybody got like $1,400. Unemployment benefits were boosted for, what was it, like $300 a week or whatever. Yeah. And all that spending right there has now caused all this inflation that all the Republicans are talking about now. Um, is because of that spending, because that's definitely been a discussion. I mean, even I've talked about it on some of my podcasts. I've definitely talked about that we're experiencing higher inflation, aka we're experiencing higher prices, and it's because Americans got $1,400 and unemployment benefits got boosted $300 a week. That's definitely what caused it. Because if we go back, which we can do that, it's amazing. It's called history. Learn, you could look into it. If we go back to biblical times, actually, we don't have to go back that far. When Adam and Eve talked to that snake, that's like Will Ferrell as George W. Bush. I couldn't help myself. Anyways, back on topic. We don't even have to go back to George W. Bush. If we go back in the last year, President Trump passed two COVID relief packages. Okay. One contained the $1,200 checks that was passed, maybe in March of 2020. And then there was a second COVID relief package that was passed in December of 2020 that contained about $600. Okay. These also contain things like boosted unemployment, which was actually even more generous than under the Biden plan. So, yeah. Anyways, I know a lot of people couldn't really recall it, but there were a lot of Republicans going on and on about complaining about Trump and how he's very much running up these larger deficits and all this inflation that he's causing because of his two COVID packages. I totally remember that one. Well, I guess if we could live in that alternate timeline, probably also the same alternate timeline that where we end up with President Cruz and maybe not President Trump. And it's instead President Trump going down to Cancun or something, or maybe joining the Texas Democrats that decided to go up and party it out in D.C. So, the reality of it is that these same policies were enacted under President Trump, and I barely any Republicans criticized President Trump about it. In fact, there was really no reason to, because we really didn't experience much inflation at that time. So, really, it begs the question, since the package that Biden passed is only like a couple of $1 trillion, and the two packages I talked about are a little bit more than that. I think they're probably like, like 3 trillion or whatever. Uh, why is it now that we're experiencing inflation? Well, it might just have to do with the fact that literally, when there's no demand, business isn't going to just keep making crap. They're going to cut back on supply. Now that you're reopening the economy, right? People go back to work. People can get vaccinated and still wear their mask, whatever their little hearts desire. As society reopens to some degree, now you have demand. Demand is outpacing supply. That's what's causing, in a way, that's what's causing your higher prices in gas, or if you look at, your food prices. The other thing that you have to consider when you're talking about all of this inflation, and it's the same thing when you have to be careful about when whatever president starts gloating about their job numbers. You have to ask the question of, well, what kind of jobs are we making right now? And it's just like with inflation. Well, where is all the inflation right now? Because realistically, if we really went on this idea that the policies of Biden and Trump have created all this inflation, I would almost assume that what did they take the trillions of dollars within these packages and essentially run ads so Americans could feel better about their used vehicles? I mean, that's about the only way to explain it. Yes, that's right, folks. Most of the inflation that you're experiencing is actually in used cars. And you might be wondering, well, why the hell are used cars just going up like nuts? Well, there's a chip shortage. And so dealerships, because they got to put something on the lot, right? They can't just put a llama there, right? They can't just stick a llama out there. There's only so many emperors that get turned into a llama. And so because there's not enough llamas, they go and buy used cars to put on the lot. But it all goes back to the fact of we don't have supply to meet the demand. Therefore, if there's more demand for lack of supply, you're going to end up with higher prices. That's just the bottom line. And that was kind of my overall point. And at the same time, going back to consistency, I mean, if you're that convinced that a couple of $1 trillion by the Biden administration has essentially created all this inflation, I mean, okay, I mean, I'm going to take that logic as we just did. Some of the same policies were passed under President Trump, but yet none of the Republicans talked about inflation. They didn't talk about higher prices. In fact, they talked about how they talked about higher wages under Donald Trump. I mean, it is a complete. It just doesn't even. It's like what? Like literally, in a way, Donald Trump passed the same policies that Biden passes, and they were even more generous. I know he did because all the Democrats got upset that President Trump had his name on the checks, because anyone who didn't get it directly to their account, right? The government sent a check. Well, Donald Trump signed it, and it upset a lot of Democrats. But don't worry, President Biden sent a letter to everybody. I was thinking about having mine framed or something. Maybe put it like a little frame or something. President Joe, I got this letter from President Joe Biden. So I mean, he did the same thing. But yeah, that was kind of my overall point. Is one thing too is you have to try and like break down like, okay, well, where exactly is all this inflation in, right? We can't just assume that it's because oh well, somebody got $1,400. Now I'm not saying those policies don't create any inflation. I'm just saying that for the most part, a lot of the reason as to why we're seeing the inflation is the lack of supply and the huge demand. It comes down to that. There's really no other. I mean, again, I'm all fine if you're under this illusion that, oh well, President Biden has created all this inflation due to his $2 trillion that he's spending. I'm fine with that. Then you're also attacking President Trump, and that's like a golden rule of conservatism. You don't do that because then you're really just a never Trumper or something. You're a Mitt Romney person, maybe. We'll have to throw you in that category. That's in a way me calling you lame if I'm comparing you to Mitt Romney. Yeah, I'm not a Mitt Romney guy either. But yeah, in the end, that's kind of the overall point is that we're trying to yet again, let's take a step back, right? Let's analyze. Let's go. Okay, well, wait a minute. Does this actually make a lot of sense as far as okay, well, it's literally the same policies, but yet we don't see the inflation. What else is going on? And to ask the question of like, well, what kind of inflation? You got to do the same thing on job numbers. Oh, look, we got 500,000 jobs this month. Okay, well, where were those jobs in? Were they in manufacturing? Hey, that's great. We don't have to send our mowers for the kids in China to fix. That'll be nice. No, in fact, most of the time it's usually in things like government. So, generally speaking, I mean, that's literally the largest employer in the United States is the government. So, I mean, in the end, right? In the end, it's, like I said, you can criticize Joe Biden with inflation. I'll just assume you're also criticizing President Trump. And at the same time, if you really want to get into a discussion about monetary policy, of course, now everyone's like, what the hell is Radio Guy talking about? Monetary policy, essentially printing money. We'll just leave it at that. If you really want to talk about monetary policy, my concern, realistically, and I'm being honest, it's really not higher inflation or deflation, right? It's actually higher interest rates. That's actually my biggest concern. Anyone that I know that's actually rational talking about monetary policy. But yeah, if you get caught in the inflation versus deflation, yeah, the Fed's already won that discussion in monetary policy. But that seems to be where everybody is right now because they think we're like in the 1970s or something. Everyone's going to start trading license plates or you know, I guess like bike tires. We'll have to throw that in there too because cities are more urbanized than back in the 70s in a way when it comes to transportation. People have to like trade or let me better yet, they'll have to trade air pumps. There we go. Trade air pumps or trade license plates because you could only get gas on certain days of the week because there's such a gas shortage. Even though technically there never really was. But anyways, that's a story for another day. I just thought, hey, let's have a little bit about inflation because, like I said, that's really something that everyone's kind of hitting Biden on, and I'm like yet again, I mean, if you want to hear criticisms about President Trump, if you want to hear criticisms about President Biden, they're there. You don't really have to look that hard. I mean, in all honesty, we could start with U.S. foreign policy. Oh my God. How much time you got? But not everybody has that much time, as I've already kind of gone over far longer than I intended. And yeah, before this time gets up any higher, I don't want to we want again we want the YouTube to remain cheap. We don't want anyone to have to experience hyperinflation. We don't need a Weimar Republic, you know. So I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that. Anyways, I hope everybody enjoys their Thursday, and thanks again for listening to B Rate YouTube.